Joining me on Newswatch is Gerard Henderson, head of the Sydney Institute, columnist with the Australian newspaper and author of the Media Watchdog blog. Gerard, like I say, the most astonishing cherry-picking I've ever seen. The ABC went into absolute contortions trying to make Kelly, a sceptic, seem somehow, if you look close enough, with your leg up there and under your arm, you might get him to seem like he's wrong.
Yes, well, what the taxpayer's paying for here, and RMIT gets some taxpayer money as well, RMIT University, we're paying for what is called fact check. But this is not an example of fact check, because when the facts were checked, Craig Kelly's fact was accurate. So what they're now moving, RMIT and the ABC are moving into opinion check or argument check. What they're saying is, well, he said this to someone in London, and what he said was correct, but he shouldn't have said that. He should have said something else. So that's why they come up with it's flawed. The facts were not flawed. The facts were accurate. The argument is flawed because they don't agree with the argument. They want another argument or another opinion. So this is sort of rather fraudulent. This is not fact-checking at all. This is opinion-checking, which is not far away from censorship, because what they're saying is that Craig Kelly's fact shouldn't be aired on national or international television because he should be airing another fact.
Well, it's so bizarre. What they're saying is, do not mention the fact that rainfall over Australia has increased over the last 100 years. And by the way, rainfall in Eastern Australia, most of us live, has done the same. Don't mention that. What he should have mentioned was that in winter months, in a couple of corners, since the 1970s, which was anomalously wet, there's a trend. He should have mentioned that, because what they want him to do is say global warming, global warming, global warming. Now, like I say, the reason I raise all this again is because it shows me how desperate even the ABC fact-checking unit is to attack climate skeptics and preach the global warming gospel. There's an agenda. And when that happens with even the ABC fact-check unit, backed by a university, how can you trust the thing that the ABC tells you ever about global warming?
Well, you've only got to fact-check the ABC, I suppose, except people do it with private means and not taxpayers' money, but that's all you can do. But what they're actually talking about here is what they regard as an illegitimate opinion, which is what it is. And they should declare that. They should declare it opinion check. And if the ABC wants to run a position against Craig Kelly's position, I mean, there are many people they go to. They've got a whole lineup of people they go to. They could interview them, but they don't do that. They're not putting one opinion against another opinion. They're saying that Craig Kelly's opinion is flawed, and here's their opinion, which is a better opinion. But of course, you can also say their analysis is flawed too, because once you've got competing opinions, people can come up with. I mean, that's what democratic society is all about. It's all about competing opinions. But ABC Fact Check now won't allow that. They don't.
Well, I'd go worse. I'd go more. I think this is terribly serious. It's not just a fact check unit that doesn't allow different opinions. It's the entire ABC. It is a monolith, an absolute monolith. It is the biggest media organisation by far in this country, gobbling up $1 billion a year of taxpayers' money. It's got its hand out for even more. Its private competitors are going to the wall because they've got to sell their product to survive. The ABC does not. And this is an example of how the ABC, from top to bottom, from the cleaner to the chairman, is squealing about global warming and monstering anyone that comes up with a fact that they find inconvenient. Gerard, I actually think this is a menace to a democracy.
I'd leave the cleaner out of it. I think the cleaners there do a pretty good job. But once you go to the journalists, that's what you're talking about. What you have in the public broadcaster is an absolute orthodoxy. It's always been around. I think it's never been worse. There is much more orthodoxy now. There are very few competing opinions, and people with competing opinions are not asked on the programs. Some who are asked on the programs won't go on the programs because they think they won't get a fair go. So what you've just got, a public broadcaster funded by the taxpayer, which is a conservative free zone and which preaches an orthodoxy. It's a kind of a religious movement, like the old religious movements that we were aware of 50 years ago, where there was a truth. And if you didn't agree with the truth, you could walk away. But if you were staying in the organisation, you either felt compelled to believe the truth or you believe that in any event. And that's why there virtually are no dissenting views within the ABC. And ABC journalists and executive producers don't hear dissenting views. And I just know from my time on the Insiders program, you talk to them in the green room before, and virtually everyone's agreeing with everyone else. And that's common throughout the organisation. And the editor-in-chief, who is paid to be editor-in-chief as well as managing director, doesn't play the role as editor-in-chief, and it's run by a series of collectives, and they essentially all agree with one another, they all promote one another, and they all appoint one another. So when this kind of issue comes up, it's no surprise.
We've made that point, Gerard, and every Liberal MP watching must know that this is unhealthy for a democracy. It's also unlawful. It's against the ABC Charter, being taxpayer-funded, to be impartial. You've got to do something about it. This is just insane. An entire national broadcaster inflamed with a religious zealotry and picking on people that mention inconvenient truths. I mean, it's just ridiculous.